Yeah. Okay, perfect. So the subject is self-acceptance. And what I do is when I approach this, teaching it to somebody else, I let them know, hey, look, this coaching discussion, it's a work in progress. I need your help to just participate for me as like a practice client and engage so you can make suggestions on how I can do things better. What should I edit? What should I revise? What are other opportunities for improvement? I appreciate you helping me out as like a practice client here as I try to develop some coaching skills. So thanks so much for helping me out. I'm counting on you. Thank you. Right. So I open with that. And the reason is that if people have self-acceptance challenges, they will have challenges doing the work that can help them get over self-acceptance challenges because they don't think they're worth it. So it's kind of like a spell that doesn't want to be broken. So you have to come out of the gates with that. Okay. And if I have this written down on a handout, it's got big red lettering that says, disclaimer, help me fix my typos and everything else. And I had intentional typos put into it so people would find it, so that's how I approach self-acceptance. It's like people can't know that's what you're doing because they won't accept the help.
You're the mental ninja.
Yeah. So anyway, you guys know me better, so I'm just being straightforward with you. Otherwise, I would open up with, hey, can you guys help me out? I need some feedback on this coaching discussion. So just participate. It doesn't apply. None of this applies to you, so don't worry about it. But
it's true. Like people take it personally if they think that you're there to work on them. They just put up the walls. So you have to get through that.
Yeah, because they feel judged and they're using a model for self-acceptance that's disempowering them so that the solution itself is something to be feared because it feels like their value is even lower to require a solution, right? So
but Brandon, you have to realize in that moment, they are in love with that identity. They're in love with that phase that's going on. Because if you look at me from like 2 weeks ago, I'm pretty much that. Where I was totally not accepting of myself. I hated myself. I was stuck in a situation I felt helpless, powerless in. And the only thing I could have done, which was what I was doing, was build alternative strategies to make the situation survivable, but it wasn't fixing the problem, because fixing the problem to me was digging two shallow graves at that point. So, and I think that's all, not that I would actually do that, but I think when you think about when that person's trying to think of the solution to get out of their problem, because they're aware they're in crisis, they're not coming up with an effective strategy themselves to get themselves out of there. Like for me, it would have been leaving go, definitely. And like you said, I would have been happy to live in my car and drive Lyft because I would have been out of, but the question is, what would that be good service to the more important aspects of my life that I needed to feed?
Yeah.
And it really wasn't.
Yeah. And
the skills that get you out of Egypt aren't the same ones that get you into the Holy Land.
There you go.
Pretty much.
So a lot of people think that denying yourself acceptance is helpful and useful, and they're in the process of learning how that betrays your highest principles and objectives for your life, right? So that a lot of times people still think it's a good idea, so we tiptoe into this one, right? We're not going to come out and be like, hey, look, we need to change this, because they're going to be like, whoa. They're like, my life sucks, and I negatively judge myself, and I like it that way. Like that's where they're at right now. It's like, so we're going to ease into this conversation. So I'm just going to say like, hey, look, any relevance that this discussion might have to your personal life, probably just coincidental. So just, so they're not out there ready. Like, hey, are you saying I need to change this behavior? So purpose of this tool is to help us stop avoiding the things we avoid because of lack of self-acceptance, to stop being like overly critical towards ourselves, to better connect with ourselves so that we're better able to connect with others. Because, if you love yourself first, then you have more love energy to give to others, right? And to heal the negative self-judgments and self-loathing that leads to things like addiction, depression, bad relationships, illness, and to give yourself freedom to have fun, right? Give yourself permission to do the things you enjoy and explore your curiosities and be at peace with your inner self so you can be at peace with everybody. So that's kind of the purpose here. And, getting along with yourself is the most important point in getting along with the rest of the world, right? So if you can have harmony inside of you, then you can always carry around your own portable personal paradise, as Yogananda once said. So we want to be able to create that inner harmony. Now we're going to do an assessment. Everybody is going to, don't share your score, by the way. This is just private. If you want to discuss where you're at or anything, just as a conversation point, you can, but this is just private. There's a 6-question assessment we can all do. This comes from Kristen Neff, who's like the self-compassion expert out there. If there's any question you don't want to answer, just don't answer it. Every question must get scored on a scale of 1 to 5. 1, so I'm going to describe something, and then if that applies to you almost never, you give it a 1. If it applies to you occasionally, 2, 3 for if it's about half the time, 4 fairly often, 5 almost always. I gotta put the recording on so we can see that. Yeah, can you show them to the camera again?
Oh,
That cute little baby.
Can you say hi, bud? Can you say hi?
what's his name?
No.
Bentley.
Oh, nice. Like the car.
Yes. So when, because I've been studying a little bit of sign language, so I made up, the sign for him when we're talking about him is this.
Awesome. So, perfect. Okay. So we're going to go through this assessment. Everybody gets scored out of 30. You can just keep your scores to yourself. You want to know your number because getting clarity on this is going to give you power. Okay. And everything is once again scored 1 to 5. 1 if it almost never applies to you, 5 if it's almost always. Okay. So I'm going to give you 6 statements and you have to score how well that statement applies to you right now as you are. So statement number 1, I try to be understanding and patient toward those aspects of my personality I don't like. 1 means almost never, 2 is occasionally, 3 about half the time, 4 fairly often, 5 almost always. I try to be understanding and patient towards those aspects of my personality I don't like. So just give yourself a number. And if you have to, if you're like, I'm between a 3 and a 4, give yourself a 3.5 and just split the difference. Okay. Now, question number 2. When I'm going through a very hard time, I give myself the caring and tenderness I need. Question number 2. When I'm going through a very hard time, I give myself the caring and tenderness I need. 1 if it's almost never, 5 almost always, and then we got everything in between, depending on where you score on that. Okay. Question 3, or statement 3, is when I feel inadequate in some way, I try to remind myself that feelings of inadequacy are shared by most people. When I feel inadequate in some way, I try to remind myself that feelings of inadequacy are shared by most people. Once again, scoring that 1 to 5. 1 is almost always, 2 occasionally, 3 about half the time, 4 fairly often, 5 almost always. Okay. Next one, number 4. When things are going badly for me, I see the difficulties as part of life that everyone goes through. When things are going badly for me, I see the difficulties as part of life that everyone goes through. Once again, another score, 1 to 5. We got 2 more to go. All right. The next one is this. When I'm feeling down, I try to approach my feelings with curiosity and openness. When I'm feeling down, I try to approach my feelings with curiosity and openness.
Right.
And, you know, you might remember Tony Robbins himself would say, you know, if you are feeling down, say to yourself, what do I have to believe to feel this way right now? Is it really true? Right? He's shared with people a method on how to be open and curious to those feelings. Right? So, and number 6, the last one here is when I fail at something important to me, I try to keep things in perspective. When I fail at something important to me, I try to keep things in perspective, scoring it 1 to 5. Okay. So if you add all of those up, you're going to have a score out of 30, which is your self-acceptance score. This is a benchmark. The lower the score, the better, because it means you have greater opportunity and potential ahead of you, right? So yeah, go team. So that's kind of where everybody is at. Did anybody have any thoughts on that assessment? Any reflections you want to share? We can go on to the next part next, but it's basically just a benchmark to kind of, so we have something quantifiable and measurable, because when we keep self-acceptance ambiguous, we don't have power. We need clarity to have power. So we need to know where our opportunities are and how much. Yeah, Joel?
I think the beauty of the assessment is that it takes 6 things that are what I don't think any of us would question are truths, that are like deeper truths that we may not think about, but rather than just making statements about them like, hey, you should be more emotionally kind to yourself when things are rough, it just has you rate them as though like, hey, this is kind of a fact, like where do you place in relation to that fact? So it's just kind of like a stealthy way of like putting it out there without just saying, you know, hey, take all this and eat it down.
Yeah, it's getting you to own your reality. Right? That's what we're really getting to do. Rather than preaching to you, I'm just getting you to own your reality with it, right? So and those are based on mindfulness, self-kindness, and you know, there's a bit of the victim mentality in there with some of the statements, right? So people will beat themselves up thinking that their situation is completely unheard of in all of humanity and everything else. So here's something that here's the next process we should all go through. We need to get clear on what our self-acceptance rule is. Everyone's got a rule. If you don't know what it is, you're being ruled by it unconsciously. What has to happen for you to accept yourself? What has to happen for you to accept yourself? Think about it. And it's whatever answer bubbles up first is usually what it is. Even though you're like, oh, this bubbled up, but I don't like that. It's like, if that's what's bubbling up, that's what's there, you know, like it's coming to the surface, right? So what has to happen for you to accept yourself, right? People might say, I need to be a top performer at work, right? Or I need verbal affirmation from everyone else that I'm doing a good job. Or, you know, they might come up with all kinds of different answers, but we don't want something ambiguous, because then it can never be satisfied in a very confident way. We want something that's fair and appropriate. You know, somebody might be like, I need to be perfect. That's kind of their rule. Like, everything needs to be perfect in my life. And I'm like, well, is that really fair? Is that a fair rule? You know, like, we want something that doesn't invite over passivity. So sometimes people are like, oh, I just need to be a human being. And I'm like, well, that's good, maybe as a start, but then you might be overly passive with that rule, right? We want something that might empower us a little bit more, you know, in terms of, and we'll talk about that, you know, because we want to just,
off the hook.
What was that, Chris?
It lets you off the hook.
Yeah. We don't want to let ourselves, that great. Thank you for sharing that. we don't want to let ourselves off the hook. Off the hook and accept and make ourselves comfortable with a low standard in life. That's actually sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins. Now, some of you might have answers that have come up, and some of you might have answers on might have thoughts on what a good answer could be. So does anyone want to just share their thoughts on this? Like, hey, I think this would be a good answer, or this might be a good way to this might be a good rule. Anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah. The thing that bubbled up for me was that I have to act with honorable intentions to accept myself.
Ah, okay. So, let's put that one in the parking lot. I want to work with that one. That's a good one. That's a good one. There's a little bit of room for improvement in it, but we can chat about that. Actually, why don't we chat with this right now? Act with honorable intentions. As human beings, do we sometimes falter and act with, selfish motives that might be not so honorable? Yeah, so there's a there is some we might say make a sincere effort to live with honorable intentions.
Yeah. I think that makes it more reasonable and possible.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
another way, it's an absolute and an ideal. And that's less likely to happen because once you fall off the wagon, are you banned from the wagon or can you get back on the wagon?
You're nailing it, Chris. Yeah, absolute. So we want to make it focus on effort, not outcomes.
Well, if you fall off the wagon, it depends if you fall like in front of the wheel that then rolls you over and breaks your spine. Like, did you fall clear to the side and roll free of harm, and then you just have to chase it back down? Or, did you fall on the tracks and get smushed? So there is that.
And there are wagon tracks on top of your back. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense to make it something that's achievable because it's like self-sabotage if you make it not achievable, because then it's like you're never able to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, we don't want to dampen our enthusiasm because then you might be like, well, I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be able to live with honorable intentions in a perfect way, right?
I think with these questions, you have to make the rule of the game winnable. Like Tony Robbins had said, you have to make your own game winnable. And a lot of people don't. It's like the only time you ever feel like you have a win is when you win $1 billion and are on top of the world. And that happens how often? If your rules that for this game are not achievable or within the realm of achievement, you're really running a fool's errand and playing a game that you're basically going to lose every time, and then you're going to have the pain of loss, but not have the strategy of win.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Good point. So here's what I think might be a good start if people want to come up with a rule. I think for self-acceptance, we should decide upon what we value most in life. Decide upon what you value most in life, and then commit to making the effort to live by those values. Most people aren't clear on what they think is important for them. They don't take themselves seriously, and so they don't have self-esteem because they don't have a good foundation for self-esteem. They're constantly acting in conflict to their higher values and principles. They might lie, even though honesty is important for them. They might indulge in all kinds of behavior because they just haven't got clear on what their highest values are in life. So I think, self-acceptance really comes from deciding on that. What do I value most in life? What, for example, honorable intentions, which might be, I'm here to, learn how to unconditionally love and accept everybody, right? And make that effort. So, there's going to be times when it doesn't happen. And then I'm going to discipline my focus and perspective to see if I can figure out what I like and appreciate about this person and just keep that a work in progress, right? We might do that. We might have the intention of living to find our happiness through the happiness of other people rather than looking for self-gratification, selfish happiness. You know, we might want to live with the value of taking extreme ownership and responsibility instead of always looking to blame someone or something for everything that falls apart in our life. You know, once we get clear on what's important to us, and then we just be mindful and make an effort, then it's easier for us to accept ourselves. And that's always personal to everybody. I just say, pick whatever works for you in this moment. You know, what's important for you in life and how can you live that every day and make that effort. So the other category that I ask on this is your self-identity. Like, what is the label you give yourself on how you participate as a human being in the human experience? Right? So some people their label might be that, you know, they might say, well, I'm a police officer, or I'm a vegan, or I'm a father, or I'm a millionaire, or, you know, they make decisions on what they are. But those decisions will really determine how they live life, right? It determines how we interpret our experiences. Somebody's like, I'm a mistake. Like, imagine that's their label. Or I'm a failure, you know, like, then they're interpreting everything through that lens. So, you know, how you interpret your experiences depends on how you define the experiencer. And so that's so critical to a human life. So I want you just to take a moment just to think about how you define how you participate in the human experience. How do you define yourself? What's your label?
How do you define yourself?
Right? Like when you say I'm, fill in the blank. Like, it's just like, what is it? And ideally, we want something that's simple, clear, and powerful because it focuses us on what matters most. Ideally, right? You know, we want it to be something that doesn't depend on factors outside our control. We want it to be something that, you know, has lots of ways for us to succeed, you know, instead of one very limited way. We want something that's possible and likely to happen to be able to satisfy. We want something where the conditions can't be taken away from us. If we say I'm a police officer, well, what happens if you get fired and you lose your job, right? What kind of a crisis does that create in your life? You know, if you think like I'm a young hip party dude, well, then you hit midlife and now you've got a crisis because you've always identified with being this younger version of yourself, right? Anyone have any thoughts on this point? Your self-definition?
When you're trying to get somebody to engage with their self-definition of something that is higher than themselves,
is that your question? Sorry, I was waiting for you to finish. Did you finish? Oh, I think Chris,
when
You're cutting out, Chris.
yeah, Chris, do you want to throw it in the chat? You're getting cut out right now.
Sure.
Perfect.
But text and drive.
Oh yeah, but to make sure you're not driving, yeah. Okay. I would say this. You know, we want to make sure that we don't have like a fixed outcome measure self-definition, because that gives us a fixed mindset, right? So we want to have something that's growth focused. So one of the things that I would encourage is maybe some variant on, you know, I am a high effort learner with high potential inside me. If you view yourself as a high effort learner, well, now you're going to invite that spirit of curiosity and learning to your experiences, right? And if you recognize high potential inside you and you honor that and acknowledge that, then you won't get discouraged by the things that you're facing, because you're staying in touch with the insight of the higher potential in you to overcome virtually any experience, human experience, whether it be, extreme physical suffering from back pain or a massive leak because you forgot to glue something. It's just like, you know what, I could figure this out. Like I figured out everything, and I'm a high effort learner, and eventually I'll get to the bottom of what's going on. And I've got the potential to be very solution focused and resourceful. And, if I just make it my mission, so I got this. We're like, we really want to come up with a self-definition that gives us that deeper sense of, I got this, no matter what happens. So I think that's really important. And I think that even a self-definition like that can apply to all of us, right? That we're a learner that's got high potential inside us, right? It keeps it on the spirit of evolution. Now what we can do is the next part will open up for a bit of discussion. Okay. So we need to convince ourselves. So this kind of stuff was very foundational. Let's see where we're at. Let's do an assessment. Let's figure out we don't have any resistance to self-acceptance that's unreasonable, right? So let's figure out that we don't have a rule that's blocking us because we feel like if we accept ourselves, we're going to get lazy or whatever. Like we just need to get rid of any of those rules that might disempower us. Now we need to convince ourselves that it's a good idea to commit to the shift, that it's a good idea to shift to accepting ourselves. So here's my question, and I'll throw it out and everybody can have a turn to share on this one. How does being hard on yourself or blaming yourself betray what you stand for in life? How does it betray your higher purpose here in this life when you do that to yourself? When you beat yourself up, right? Chris, you want to unmute yourself and share first?
I'll repeat the question one more time. I just put something into the chat.
Yeah. How does being overly hard on yourself and blaming yourself betray your higher objectives in life? How does it betray your higher purpose in life?
Well, I have to say, it's just like when Steve said that the victim's mentality is the funeral of your higher thoughts. It is pretty much the same, except we're talking about your identity. This lesser identity feeds and sells lack of effort very effectively. So that you're not, it is selling not your higher purpose, and you're buying into it and you're feeding on it. Once you reach that hard pressure point of becoming more self-accepting, you will then put in that effort to start to engage in your higher purpose more effectively. It is like being addicted to drugs. You could have watched, like I said, going back to me, watching me for these past few months, watching me addicted to drugs. My drug was this low acceptance, low identity of myself, which basically said, you don't have to try because you're not going to get anywhere. There's no sense in you putting in all this effort because nothing's going to happen. You're not going to get any of the things that you want. So boy, woe is me, and I'm just not going to do anything. So I buy into that, and it also gets me off the hook into doing anything about it. Only after this weekend have I now started to say, look, I can start to feel better and start to make more effort. I got 6 measurements today. I'm going to be working on AR tonight. I'm now putting in the effort. And with the result of putting in that new effort, I'm starting to build that higher identity, that higher purpose.
And awesome.
So that is where.
Awesome. Really great points. Really great points. It feels like work, so we let ourselves off the hook, even though we're just creating unproductive suffering, likely. We haven't done anything meaningful. You talked a lot about how it basically blocks us from those higher thoughts, creativity, joy, ability to connect with others through a lot of the moodiness it might create too. So lots of excellent points. What about you, Steve? Any thoughts on that? How does, being overly harsh and judgmental on yourself actually betray your ultimate mission in life?
Well, I think one of the biggest things it does is it changes my perception of reality, right? And when my reality in a bad state like that, difficult state, emotional dumpster, whatever the case is, it very much closes off my mind as far as what are possibilities, what am I capable of. And until I snap out of that and get in a different state, I have no creativity, I have no imagination. And honestly, I think part of the human condition is if you think there is zero chance of success, why it doesn't merit your effort, right? I mean, if something were absolutely true that no matter how hard I tried, I had zero chance of success on something, why would you keep doing that?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a situation of I just haven't found the right way to do that, and so I've got to go at a different angle, or I have to take a step back, find a different way. I need a fresh set of eyes on it. One of the things that's been helpful to me is, as we've been doing all this plumbing crap with our house, if I've had one of my boys with me, I've got a different set of eyes and a different perspective, and they have said things that, whether it's because they were physically across from me looking at it at a different angle, or their height or their experience or whatever it is, both of my boys have said, well, what about this? And, oh, you should do it this way. And I go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And I didn't necessarily have that. But one thing that I really struggle with is when I start down a road, I don't come back to see if there was another road. I go down that road and I'm usually going fast and I lay on the gas. And so all my thought process kind of funnels down to that path I'm on. And, to the point that it is easy for me to miss other possibilities, other perspectives, other ways of looking at it. Not that I am like arrogant or prideful in, hey, this is the only way to get out of my face. This is the only way to do it. But if I've identified a path, my mind tends to go straight down there and shut off other possibilities. If I'm getting in a bad mental state, it's like tunnel vision. I can see crap close in and it gets very difficult to be positive, to make breakthroughs. I have to snap that out. I've got to get in a better state. So for me, it's hard because I feel like there's a lot of things in life that somebody could write a book for a life lesson and give an example of how one thing works in that situation, but then a different situation, an opposing force is correct, right? We don't want to beat ourselves up and pulverize ourselves, but at the same time, we don't want to be arrogant, right? We don't want to be, whatever. There's these things where I feel like I'm always kind of going back and forth. I scored really low on this assessment. I mean, I scored like 16, and I had a 1 and a 2 and 3 threes. I mean,
I think you're beating yourself up even in how you scored, which, because I was like, what'd you do? Single digits? I thought you were going to say single digits. You said 16. I'm like, that's actually not that bad, Steve. Like, you're actually being too hard on yourself on how you scored yourself, on how hard you are on yourself. Isn't that ironic?
Minus
yeah, but that's
1
like
point.
an F minus in school, though. That's like an F minus, and it's not a grade they'd like to give out a lot.
So I love it. You had a lot of good points there. You had, that it creates negative momentum, which usually gets worse. You miss out on seeing possibilities and alternate opportunities. You get tunnel vision. It creates this disempowering reality around you, which might discourage you with engaging with the process of life and paralyze your progress. So there's lots of great points on how, and is that the kind of person you want to be? Somebody who does that to themselves, right? Like, are you going to buy a
No,
super
not at all.
awesome,
Because
are you going to buy a Bentley car and just leave it in the driveway? Or are you going to learn how to drive that thing? Like, you've incarnated with this
No, I'm living
incredible
in it.
potential. You've incarnated. Why not learn how to drive that potential?
Yeah. Well, and it's just, sometimes, and, Tony Robbins talked about this a little bit, but it's stacking. And when bad things start to happen, and, one thing, yeah, I can brush it off. And then two things, and, okay, whatever. 3, 4 things, then it's like the collective weight starts to
Yeah.
bear down. And that to me is I have to first recognize what's happening, because I can't break that pattern until I recognize that it's happening. And it's almost like the house we're living in the other night, the lights started to dim a little bit, and almost to the point where I couldn't tell if they had dimmed, but it wasn't as bright in the room. And so if I'm like kind of distracted and the lights are dimming in the room and I don't know it, I may not recognize that for what it is. And so for me, I have to recognize it before I can break the pattern,
Yeah.
get out of the cycle or whatever.
So, yeah, you got to catch it right now.
I've
Get better at
got to
catching it.
catch it. And I think I'm getting better since UPW at catching it, because those like dumpster fires would last days, sometimes a week, in the past, several years ago. And usually I'm kind of able to get out of it unless I'm really tired or fatigued. And then I just almost have to, from a self-care standpoint, kind of tap out, go lay down, take a nap, rest or something, because when I get really fatigued and stuff's getting stacked, I can't just, do my whatever move and I'm done, so I've got to do a mountain bike ride, a half-hour nap or something, to kind of break my cycle and get me out of that.
So one of the things you might do to add another layer to it, and I'm going to speak in terms that are going to relate to you, since you're mentioning Tony Robbins, UPW, I'm going to reference his approach on such a subject, which would be, if you look at the book, Awaken the Giant Within, he would invite you to take the 10-day challenge, which was inspired by Emmett Fox, I believe, and had a 7-day challenge that inspired Tony. But basically for 10 days, you decide that 10 days, that whenever this comes up, that you catch it and you turn it around right away. You don't indulge in it. Now, if you do indulge in it, you got to start again at day 1. But the rule is also you're not allowed to beat yourself up, because that defeats the purpose, and be like, oh, I screwed it up. I got to day 9 and I screwed it up. That defeats the purpose. Instead, you just, laugh because it's funny, right? And just start all over again. But if you don't do a 10-day challenge, like you really want to gain some momentum on self-awareness, which leads to self-regulation. So a 10-day challenge would really, most people underestimate the efforts to create a shift, and they overestimate their own ability to overcome things. So they really need an effective dose of awareness and regulation. I think a 10-day challenge is a really good place to start pick up those insights and perspectives. And here's the thing. If you decide, okay, I'm not going to negatively judge myself or beat myself up for 10 days, ideally you get addicted to that because you find it's just such a more pleasurable way to live your life. But if you decide it doesn't work out, you can go back to all that toxic junk and dumpster fires. You can always go back to it after 10 days. You can be like, oh, I missed you, self-loathing. So you know what? There's no risk to you on that one. Awesome. I'm going to keep things moving along here. Celine, any thoughts on how being overly hard on ourselves betrays our higher purpose in life?
Yeah, I think that Steve touched on so many. I mean, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Uh, and being so hard on yourself and you're not able to grow or advance. And, I was just thinking, I was dealing with grief, the 5 stages of grief, and acceptance is one of the last things. And it's hard for me to get there, to even get to acceptance. And I'm coming at and I'm looking at through those lenses, and it's really hard to accept, but I know that that's what I need to do in order to move on. But sometimes your emotions just doesn't catch up, and you just have to accept that emotion as well. I guess it's different stages of acceptance. And one of your questions about self-acceptance is let me see. When I'm going through a very hard time, I give myself caring and tenderness. Like, that's also part of acceptance too. I guess, like the mini acceptance. It's okay. Like, if you can't accept the situation, you can accept that you're not quite ready, and just kind of indulge a little bit too.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point, which is the emotionality of it. I would submit to you that you actually aren't to blame for most of the personal failings that you may blame yourself for. And the reason is that they aren't there by choice. The emotions that carry us away come from patterns we picked up. It comes from outside circumstances. We picked them up along the way, but we were unqualified to discern whether or not these patterns were destructive or helpful, right? We don't have complete control over the stuff we disapprove of, or we would have gotten rid of it all by now. So I think part of it is, giving ourselves that respect and tenderness we need around those aspects of ourselves that we might not be so accepting of right now. So something to think about. Excellent, great share. Joel, your thoughts on this one?
So to come at it from the reverse angle of, how would I label myself to be of that higher purpose? I came up with, I'm a creative and kind person that leverages resources to make the most of each experience. And so if I was being hard on myself and not serving my highest purpose, if creativity, kindness, and leveraging what I have at my disposal to make the best out of something, obviously being hard on myself kills creativity, and I'm not being kind to myself or anybody, and I'm not thinking of, creative ways to leverage things and to make the most out of something. So yeah, I mean, it's just similar to what other people have been talking about, that, when you get in that tunnel vision of, I don't even know if selfishness is the right word, but whatever it is of being angry or frustrated with yourself and not giving yourself the grace to make mistakes and to realize that if we never made mistakes, we'd never grow. Like, mistakes should be kind of celebrated. Like, if you make a mistake, as long as you're learning from it, like it's a stepping stone to progress.
Yeah, so I would say mistakes don't define us, but they educate us.
Yeah.
Right? Failure sucks, but it instructs.
Failure sucks, but it instructs. I like that.
So I think another good angle to add to all of this is that, because if we are overly hard on ourselves, we won't feel released to be who we truly are. We will be afraid to be ourselves because we've convinced ourselves we're not any good. We will fear people getting to know the real me. That's a big deal. That's real for a lot of people. I also think that when we're hard on ourselves, it creates pain for those who care about us. They see us suffering and they suffer along with us. Like, if any of your kids is beating themselves up and they're indulging in self-loathing, you'd suffer with them, wouldn't you? It'd be hard not to, right? So just know that other people feel that way when they see you being overly hard on yourself. It creates pain on them too. Those who look up to you are going to role model that behavior. If they see you mess something up and you say, I'm such an idiot, I'm such a dummy, like, then they think that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to talk to yourself like that when you aren't perfect. And so you screw them up too, right? So we want to just, I think this is it. This is the angle I like to take with parents on self-acceptance. It's like, hey, look, if you're not going to do it for you, at least do it for your kids, right? Like they suffer when you suffer, and they're going to learn how to create suffering because you've taught them how, you've showed them how with your behavior, right? So I think those are some angles I'd like to just throw into that mix of answers. And then also, like, when we aren't succeeding, we deserve more compassion, not less. Like, it's opposite. Like, people think, oh, I deserve less compassion when I'm not succeeding. No, actually, you deserve more. The opposite is true. If you don't believe me, try both methods out and see how it works out for you, right? So let's go on to the next discussion point. So we need to convince ourselves that it's not a good idea to be overly hard on yourself, right? Like, we need to get to that point, because otherwise a subconscious part of you is going to still think it's a good idea and will still indulge in it. Like, if I told Steve to take the 10-day challenge, he's going to be like, well, maybe I'll do it later because I still feel like it's really helping me. It motivates me. It gets my attention. And I'm like, maybe that's true, but is there a better way? Possibly there is, but you don't have the opportunity to even see that better way because you've given yourself tunnel vision, right? You're only doing things this way, and that's all you see. So I would challenge somebody to kind of get over some of those resistances there. Now, number 2, why should you view yourself as a work in progress instead of judging yourself in the moment? So somebody might say, oh, I'm a failure, I'm no good, blah, blah, blah. Why should we view ourselves as a work in progress instead of judging ourselves in the moment?
Well, the obvious one is it's empowering.
Yeah.
It's disempowering just to be like, it's futile, what's the point? Rather than, hey, this is just one step in the process.
Yeah, it propels us forward, right? It propels us forward by focusing on the journey rather than trying to cling to a destination we can never cling to in a lasting way. It gets us happy about who we're becoming instead of judging and having all the pressure on who we are in the moment. Right? Anyone else have any thoughts on this one? Why should you view yourself as a work in progress instead of judging yourself in the moment?
I was reading a book called Mindfulness, I think by Jay Siegel, who was a doctor. And he mentioned that when we make mistakes and do things that are stupid, it's not you, it's just your brain. So when you do something wrong, it's not me, it's my brain. And that your brain as an organ just needs to be re-educated or retrained. So when you're saying, I'm a work in progress, it gives your brain other options and directions to focus on other than one single definition, which is you're a failure. It gives your brain subconsciously ways to look for ways to improve the situation or at least get itself out of the stuck so that it can move forward. That statement inherently will make you look for things, will make you inherently look for solutions as opposed to being just stuck in the moment and reliving the moment.
I love that. That was a great way of articulating that. When you screw up, it's not you, it's your brain, it's an organ. Just train that organ. I love it. That's such a great way to look at it. And it's true. I think really what you're getting at is this is true. You're not done yet. What matters is the future you. And there was a quote that I'd just like to share, and it comes from Swami Kriyananda, Secrets of Health and Healing book, was, always remember the more important the painting, the longer the time and the greater effort required to carry it through to perfection. Right? So that's a great quote I like when it comes to this aspect of self-acceptance. Steve, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I do. When I was a little kid, I wore the same type of clothes to school every day. I had a white t-shirt, flannel shirt, my blue jeans, and my little boots that I'd wear to school every day. Same thing. My mom tried to get me to wear something else. I'd only wear, the same thing all the time. And, growing up, my parents would go out and, they'd go to steakhouses or Chinese food a lot. And I didn't like Chinese food growing up. And it wasn't until I was probably like in my 30s that I really started craving it. And then had a friend that was, her dad was a Japanese chef that introduced me to Japanese food. And I found some stuff I liked. And so I think it was 2012 or 13, I made a goal that year to do 12 new things. So I wanted to go out of my way to try a new type of food or go to a new place or, try something that maybe I had been putting off or whatever the case was. And I think I did like 26 pretty significant things that year. So right now I'm doing this kind of 50-50 thing. I turn 50 next week. So for 50 days, I'm doing 50 push-ups, 50 squats, 50 ab whatevers. But one of the things is I have to do a new thing every day for these 50 days. So it might be, trying a new soda. It might be going to a new restaurant, going to a lake here in Oregon that I've never been to. And so I have to go out and search something, seek out something every day, some type of new experience. And, I wasn't really kind of like that 8 years ago. It's kind of like, I just want to do my thing. I like my routine. I like, staying in my lane and kind of doing all that. And now it's like, I want to take that Bentley and I want to swerve all over the damn freeway and go whatever lane I want to. And, do a 4-lane sweep and come back and forth. And it's been cool just trying new stuff and seeking out things and just looking for new experiences and trying to kind of shift my focus off of things and shift it on experiences, with my kids and whatever, family and that kind of thing. And it's really, made it where I found a lot of stuff that, 10 years ago, I'd be like, nah, zero interest. I still hate musicals. Let's be clear on that. I am still not going to a musical. I hate them with all of my being. I hate musicals so much, but
There's still time, Steve. There's still time.
Yeah.
No,
Have you
no.
seen Les Miserables yet? Have you seen that'll convert you?
No, false. I can't do it. But, it's cool just because I found stuff in my life that, Indian food is one of my favorite foods now. And I had Indian food for the first time like 7-8 years ago. And, now my wife has learned how to make a lot of different curry and things like that. And we eat it a lot. And so it's cool to, for me to kind of get out of just being a boring, habitual individual to, getting out there and doing new stuff,
Awesome.
Cool.
Love it. Love it. So, a lot of the theme of what you've shared is, rather than affirming limitation, affirm your vast potential for experience and expression, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think all of us, we don't have, I'll speak to you specifically, Steve. You don't have enough time in your limited human life to achieve all of your potential. There
Right.
isn't enough time to learn every language, although given eternity, you'd be able to do it, I'm sure. You'd be able to learn every sport if there was enough time, or learn every handyman skill, or read every book, or learn to
Right.
play, learn to appreciate every musical if you had all the time in the world, right? Yet you have far more potential than you can ever use in your life, and infinite expressions available to you. If we judge and define ourselves in the moment, we're affirming limitation. But if we view ourselves as a work in progress, it brings us back to that. Celine, how about yourself?
What's the question again?
Why should we view ourselves as a work in progress instead of judging and defining ourselves in the moment?
Yeah. I think that way we won't be too hard on ourselves and realize that it's not possible to learn everything just quickly. I think that's something that I heard, millennials believe, like, if you don't get it first couple of tries, and like, forget it. I think it was, whoever said that it takes about 10,000. Oh yeah, Malcolm Gladwell said like it takes about 10,000 hours in order to master something. So I think that's true.
Yeah.
So
Can I just applaud you for how many hats you wear?
I'm done.
And you wear them very well.
Oh, thank you. I don't feel like I'm doing everything right, but I do know that there's a lot of other moms that are doing exactly what I'm doing.
Love
We're
it.
just doing the best we can. And yeah, it takes a
Awesome.
long time. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. I love what you said. It's basically, this is a more compassionate way to live. You're going to give yourself more patience and understanding. You're basically saying that you're giving yourself a permission slip to be a human, right? And being a human means making mistakes and learning from them. It's like people have a standard of living a human life where perfection is what they expect of everything. And that's like expecting to go onto a golf course and hit a hole in one on all 18 holes, right? Like, does anyone ever like get born into this life and achieve nothing but perfection all the way to the end? Very few special beings, right? Perhaps, but not most of us, so great.
Right,
great
because
shares on
even
that.
the best in the world can't make every shot, right? They can't, play the guitar without missing a note occasionally. I mean, nobody, even the best of the best in the world, the best in any given thing, cannot perform with 100% accuracy every time.
Well,
Right? If it was, Tiger Woods could go pop in a hole in one and be done in 36, shots and call it good, and no one would ever be able to touch him. Or, if Michael Jordan made every shot, or whoever it is, you give them the ball and they make every shot, there's no competition, but we just can't perform like that. Even the best of the best. Plus, it always drove me nuts when people said that, Michael Jordan was the greatest athlete in the world, because to me, if he was, he would have been playing Major League Baseball. He was the greatest basketball player, but not the greatest athlete, right? To me, the greatest athlete in the world, I don't know who they are, but they have to be like a decathlete, right? They have to perform in 10 events, not one, or, whatever. So even the best of the best do not have absolute mastery and command of their realm of influence, right?
Yeah, love it. So I'm going to go through the next two really quickly, and then maybe we'll have a discussion on the third point. So we want to also consider, how does the unappealing or shameful aspects of our past serve as a strength and asset? Why do you have even more value because of your past, right? And we might say that, we can replace these negative feelings with gratitude for life lessons learned. It gives you insights and experience that can help you help others. It's a strength, not a weakness, because every experience gives us lessons we can pass on to people we care about. Everyone's life has been an experiment with what works for you. Through experience what works for you and what doesn't. You've explored many different attitudes, many different motives, many different values, right? So all of that has been a valuable experience. Beating yourself up has been a valuable experience. You've explored it. You are now convinced it does not bring you the happiness you thought it would, right? So, once again, all of this uncomfortable stuff, it gives you greater character endurance. Your mistakes are not defining you, but they are educating you and serving for your personal evolution. Sometimes we get confused, but confusion's not a crime, so we're all just figuring out how to conduct ourselves as we go. And all of that stuff that we might be ashamed of is actually served in our current growth. So that's another point worth reflecting on and just convincing ourselves is a good idea. The next one is this. I want you to think about, everybody here, just think about this. How have you been a blessing to many, many people? Can you even describe all the good you've done in your life? Have you done more kindness for people in your life than you could possibly remember? Because I'm going to submit to you that you don't even know how good you've been. You don't even have the capacity to measure your own goodness. So how can you negatively judge yourself and not accept yourself? You're not qualified to make that kind of a negative judgment about yourself. You know, you can't even measure your value and worth because you can't remember all that good stuff. Humility actually helps us with self-acceptance, because humility helps us with self-honesty, that we don't know what we don't know. You know, I'm willing to bet that all of you have been a blessing more times than you can count. Maybe you don't remember, but the people that you've done things for, remember, it's embedded in their hearts and in their minds. So I think everybody deserves some respect because you're important to other people more so than you realize. You've been more important in the role of evolution for many beings around you, and you are therefore obliged to take better care of and honor yourself, right? Anyone have any thoughts to share on that perspective as well?
I used to have this on my affirmations. I don't, because I think I've gotten it ingrained for the most part. But a couple of the things, that I, kind of looked at was trying to leave things better than I found them. Right. So part of that kind of started from, leave no trace when you're out in nature, that kind of thing. I'm out mountain biking, I see trash, I cuss the person that left it there, I put it in my bag and I take it home, and whatever. But I try to leave something better than I found it. But then trying to leave people better than I found them. If I really try to use someone's name when I see them, like in a store and they've got a name tag, someone helps me, like at Home Depot today. And I always say, hey, thank you, Jennifer, whatever, if I know their name, if I can see their name tag,
Yeah.
just some little like that, that it's not, it's not anything huge, but over a lifetime of doing that, of just trying to, do something. I mean, I've heard people say that, the most beautiful words to someone is their own name. Right. And so, if I'm remembering my waitress's name at Buffalo Wild Wings the other day, and I use it when I see her or whatever, or I make sure to hold the door for somebody, or, like my son, we just popped in on my barber. I've got a barber that trims my beard. My son wants his haircut, and we just popped in and he was free. So he cut my son's hair. Jackson runs out to get his wallet. I said, okay, $12. I said, you need to give him a tip. It's customary to tip a barber, you need to give them a tip. And, and so just kind of little things. I mean, Brendan, kind of like you're saying, where you can't remember all the little stuff, right? Like great big community service projects. We all plan in calendar and come together and do one big show of force. Like those are great. But to me, I almost think it's more impactful, the little things, hour to hour, day to day that we do by helping someone with their groceries, taking a fussy baby from somebody, those kinds of things. And to your point, you can't possibly remember all that, the good that you've done. And it may seem trivial to me, but it could be very impactful to somebody else, the recipient,
Yeah, I would, that's a great point. And I would put that into a reflection question. How are the little acts of kindness actually a big gesture? How are the little things actually big things? Because sometimes we take those things for granted, not realizing that in somebody's day or somebody's current moment in life, what seemed kind of small and trivial was actually a big deal for them. Right? Excellent point.
I think you can look at that from the opposite point of view as well. That when we look at trying to do things that seem huge and monumental, it's just a phone call or it's just an email. In the real world, objective measurements really a small action, but it is a huge mountain to us to actually do. On the reverse end, when you do that small little action in the real world, in its actual objective measurement, it's really not that big a deal. But in that person's world, it is a huge mountain that you just moved for that person. Or it was a big move in their world that made them see themselves differently or give them some relief when they're being really hard on themselves, as we talk about how we've been hard on ourselves. They're in a moment of crisis where they're being so hard on themselves that everything seems like a mountain and monumental. To us, we just come along and just give a little push, a little 2 millimeter push, a little bit of encouragement, buy them a coffee, give some money on the street. That small little thing becomes a big thing in their world. And that's why we don't recognize it, because in our world, in that moment, it is a small gesture. In their world, it means everything because of the crisis that they're in at that time.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a good thing to think about is even what were those little tiny gestures or moments that were a big deal to us? You know, when somebody just reached out to us and connected with us and supported us in a very gentle way, like at a very critical life moment, like what were those little things that made a big deal to us? Is a good thing to reinforce this concept. So I'm going to move us on to the next question. Instead of trying to love yourself, I think we can all agree that a lot of these ideas are like all about loving yourself, right? How can you be the self that loves? Instead of trying to love yourself, just be the self that loves. Now, I want you all to think about that. And before we do, I just want to highlight some of the destructive ways that people justify loving themselves. Okay. You know, true self-compassion is always helpful, but there are some imposters that can be harmful. So a few imposters are self-indulgence. People think that excessively giving into your appetite, your desires and whims is loving yourself, right? But that can be actually harmful, right? Self-pity, they think is loving themselves and connecting with themselves, but it's just self-absorbed unhappiness over our own troubles, which can be harmful, right? Passivity, you know, compassion requires action. If baby Bentley, who Steve had on earlier today, was crying, you know, out of compassion, we would take action and tend to that baby. We wouldn't ignore it. Deep down, if we have parts of us that need to be comforted and healed, then we should also take action on it rather than just being passive. So passivity can be actually an imposter for self-love. Egotism also is the fourth one, which is being overly involved with your own needs while disregarding others. You know, people will say you need to be selfish as a form of self-love, but you know, other people are essential for your happiness and for you in general. So we need to see others as an extension of ourselves. And so those are some things we need to be careful of. Now, but other than that, it's all about, you know, how can we be the self that loves? That leads to greater self-acceptance. Does anyone have any thoughts or reflections on that?
I mean, I guess I always think back to, you know, so you have the 6 human needs, and the ones that really seem for me to be the most satisfying are growth and contribution, especially contribution. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's a balance, because you don't want to have a life where you're completely necessarily in service to everybody else, that you don't take any care of yourself, but you also don't want to be self-focused and not do anything for others. I mean, even as Steve was saying, just like taking a minute to honor somebody throughout your day in some small way, just do things that are helpful. Yeah, so it's that balance, but for me, it's that contribution that, you know, hopefully in my lifetime doing more for others than I do for myself. That's where I find fulfillment.
Yeah, and in doing more for others, you will actually receive more for yourself.
Right.
That's the ironic thing, right? Too many people put the cart before the horse.
Right.
Right. So so I love that. Given you shall receive, right? Chris?
Give even if you don't receive.
Right, and that's the point. You're not looking for a payback. You're not looking for an outcome for yourself. When you give from your abundance, and this is like when we were talking a couple weeks ago or last week about setting boundaries, that when you have those boundaries set up properly, and you decide to help someone or love someone or give something, you're giving it from a place of abundance, because you're not expecting something back. You're not giving to receive, even if it's acknowledgement, even if it's a thank you. You're giving out of your own abundance because you're not expecting anything to come back. You're just giving for the sake of giving. I think also a number of conversations back, we were talking about doing right versus being right. I think you can replace those two words with love. So being love or doing love. Being love is when you're being right. When you're, again, it's a transaction. You're looking for an outcome. You're looking for a transaction or a trade. It's not a one-step action. You're expecting something in reciprocation. Doing love is when, like I said, giving money to somebody on the street, helping somebody that's not going to, on an airplane or out in the world, a stranger that you're never going to see again. You're not worried about that coming back to you. Giving someone $10 who just ran out of gas, you're not going to see that $10 again. Nor do you care about that $10. Nor do you even care about the thank you. You want to help someone because at some point during your lifetime, you were in a tough spot. You were in a crisis. And someone reached out to you with a small gesture, which again, to that person was a small gesture. For that other person, it was a huge meaning in their life. And when you're looking for that type of entrepreneurial trade-off, giving something small to get something big, to give that something person bigger, that's what you're doing. You're not expecting to receive anything in return. You are giving to that person to help get them more. Your little investment is turning their life into something bigger. And you're not going to get a return on investment for yourself, but that's not the point. It's not for yourself. It is about building that other person. Even if it's a stranger.
Yeah. So give for the joy of giving, not for the anticipation of a return. Right?
Absolutely.
Love it. Steve, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think this comes again to one of those balance things like Joel says, right? I mean, I remember, kind of flying and, they always go through all the safety crap in the beginning, pull the mask down, put on yourself before you help others, right? And a lot of us, especially, those with kids or, young family members, whatever, your instinct is typically to try to take care of them first, especially if it's, something kind of severe or time sensitive or whatever, but in the airline situation, you can't pass out trying to help someone and then you're not going to be able to help them, right? And so I think, for me, it's, being okay if I have, if I'm sick, I've passed on, projects, helping other people and said, you know what, it's got to be someone else's turn. But then there's been times when I was planning to mountain bike and something came up and, a neighbor's moving in down the street that I skipped my ride to go help them move in. Right. And so I think for me, trying to take care of myself is important, but my conveniences and my entertainment and those types of pursuits can be pushed aside to go help someone else. But if I'm in need of repair or something like that, then that's when I've got to swing a little bit, to kind of protect myself or, take care of myself kind of thing. And, I think it's good. It's good for me. I think it's good for my character to say, I was really hoping to mountain bike this morning, but I'm going to stop and help this person change their tire instead. And you know what? I'll go ride next weekend or something like that. And if I can put my head in that type of space, then I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job of, trying to help other people along the way. And, maybe put off something that I wanted. But you know what? If I'm going to my daughter's wedding and there's someone with a flat tire, I'm probably leaving that to someone else so I don't miss her wedding for someone's flat tire that someone else can handle. And so I'm going to make a list of these things because I've been thinking a lot of these over the last couple of years. Is we're always kind of swaying back and forth, right? Trying to get to the right spot, trying to make sure that maybe the shift drifts this way a little bit, and then we kind of course correct. But as long as we're heading in the right direction, and we're trying to help our fellow beings, we're trying to do right by God, and I'm talking for myself, I feel like that's when I'm doing good, and that's when I need to not beat myself up when I'm looking for the opportunity to help others. I'm willing to take that opportunity without compensation, without praise or any of that, and move on. And I want that to be something that defines my life, right? That when I'm gone, people think, yeah, he called out of nowhere. He sent me a text out of nowhere. One thing I was just thinking of a couple days ago is I've got this huge box of postcards, and I've gotten this bad habit of I go to a city like Boston a couple of months ago and I buy 12 postcards. I don't need 12 postcards of Boston, even though it's a badass city. I need like 2. So one of the things I was just thinking about a few days ago is taking all my excess postcards, keeping my favorite, and just writing a short note to a friend and dropping it in the mail. One of my nieces or nephews. Hey, I was thinking about you. I'm proud of you. A short note in the mail to somebody, and something like that. Just to kind of help people, because there's so much negativity, and we really, I think, discount the impact we can have on people, where we think, I'm not doing this thing. I've got a Scoutmaster from when I was 12 years old, literally jumped in a river and saved my life as I was being swept down river, and I was going to drown. I was a small kid. I wasn't a strong swimmer. It was a fast current. This guy jumped in the river, FBI agent, Marine, scooped me up and grabbed me, yanked me out of the river, and literally saved my life. And I never forget that. I always think about that, when I think about my youth and the impact that guy had on me. Aside from my parents, he had the single greatest influence on my life in my youth. And I'm probably never going to do that for somebody else, but using their name or saying, I try to compliment people. I don't know if you guys notice, but I don't have a lot of hair. So when I see someone with like really cool blue hair or red hair, I always compliment them. And then I kind of make a joke. I'm like, yeah, I notice nice hair, but I try to compliment people on it. And a lot of times they're kind of like, oh yeah, like, thanks, like they're caught off guard. And I love doing that to people, because it's almost like nobody is giving them positive reinforcement. And we got too much negativity in the world, we need goodness out there.
It's the same thing with the postcards. Like, nobody takes the time to write letters to each other anymore. It's all text messages or emails. So it's really
Right.
nice to do something that nobody else takes the time to do.
Yeah. All right, Joe, I'm going to need your address.
Nice.
It's true. It's true. I got a letter with like some cookies and a book and a drawing and stuff. I loved it. I got it in the mail. Like it's so rare we get stuff like that. It's quite memorable when it happens. So I want to take a moment to articulate Steve's messages. First one is turn judgment into loving acceptance and appreciation. Instead of judging when is it a good time to love or what is worthy of love, why not just love? It's so much easier that way. Experiment with it and see for yourself how it works. True self-acceptance doesn't come from the outside in. It comes from the inside out. Just turn judgment into just unconditional love for all. Stop the judging game. It's so like endless. And it just robs our joy and happiness, and it makes it harder for us to accept ourselves. If we're just unconditionally loving, then it's so much easier to just accept ourselves, right? I also want to speak to this person who made that gesture to save you back in the day. I'll tell you what they did. What they did was they asked themselves, what is the highest good in this moment? No matter what it means for me personally. What is the highest good in this moment? That value is a gift, because when you're dealing with the confusion of, well, there's this behavior is right for this time and that's right for that time, you can really overcomplicate things if you're talking about unpacking, when is it a right time to do this or that? A good hack is to use what this person represented. What is the highest good in this moment, no matter what it means for me personally? That's how you can make decisions amidst all the confusion and avoid non-essential complexity. You can live the value of the person that saved you. Live their value. Just ask yourself, what is the highest good in this moment, no matter where it takes me or what it means for me personally? That is the secondary gift of the gesture of that individual. And even though you may not be able to give anything back to them directly, you can live his value in the world. And in that way, you're creating a better place in which he is living and will be the indirect beneficiary, right? So I would encourage you just to reflect on that. Now, I have some additional points I'll just share with you guys to wrap up on self-acceptance. One is, we had baby Bentley here earlier on today. A lot of times we're judging ourselves, harshly. And, I want you just imagine, actually imagine looking at yourself as a baby. Imagine you were holding baby Steve in your arms with those big eyes looking up at you, right? Or baby Joel or baby Chris. Imagine yourself as a baby and imagine just cradling that baby with kindness and just the love and acceptance you'd have towards that baby, just knowing it's being the best it can, but it's a baby, even though it will make mistakes or do things that aren't our preference, it's just a baby. And just know that that baby still exists within you. That version of you is still in there somewhere. It's a part of who you are today. So we want to be a good adult to ourselves and have patience and understanding and compassion like you would to the baby version of you. You can even hang up a baby picture of yourself. If you're taking this 10-day challenge of just not beating yourself up, hang up that baby picture of yourself and look at it. And remember that if you're hating on yourself, that's who you're hating on, that baby, because it's still in here trying to make sense of this confusing existence. Struggling as it does, but learning from the struggle, getting stronger each step of the way. That can be a powerful method for self-acceptance. Also, one thing you could do is just make a list of the 10 things you like about yourself. This could be qualities, experiences, or potential you have within you. I like that I have infinite creative expression musically, or I like that I was this person in this moment for this, at this time when I was needed. As you write down each quality, try to see if you have any uncomfortable feelings or any resistance to any of it, any discomfort, because you'd want to address that, right? And then here's the best one. We'll end with this one here. You know, I want you to imagine, whether this is like a high spiritual being or an imaginary friend or a spiritual master that you admire. Like, I want you to imagine that there's this being and they know everything about you from your past. They know everything about you from even before you started this life, this human life you're in. Even though you don't know it, they know everywhere you've been and everything you've done. Okay. They know everything about you in this moment. They understand all the dynamics of everyone, all the people and everything going on around you. They also understand and know everything that's coming up for you in future. Okay. But this being, they are 10 out of 10 loving and they are 10 out of 10 wise. I want you to imagine what supportive advice they would have for you right now, here in this exact moment of your life. What would this all-wise, all-knowing, all-loving being say to you in this exact moment of your life to support you? And then just imagine them sending healing love energy to the parts of you that need healing. And just know that whenever you want, you can tap in. You can attune yourself with this being, this 10 out of 10, all wise, all knowing, all loving being. And you can access that supportive guidance. In those moments when we're beating ourselves up and we're hard on ourselves, this helps us put it all in perspective, right? So, any key takeaways, concluding reflections, or final remarks for today's discussion?
I really like these last two exercises. The one of, imagine, having 3 kids, imagine, that you're cradling yourself as a small child, because I think when it's somebody else, it's easier, to think of somebody in terms of like really wanting to care for them, but you don't really always put that in your own needs in the same perspective. So I just really found that to be a helpful exercise, to have compassion on yourself and to treat yourself with kindness, because if you're holding a baby, you're not judging them. You're not, they make mistakes. The mistakes are cute, right? It's, yes. And you have nothing but love and want to care and help them. So you should have that for yourself. So I found that really helpful. And I also, found the exercise, the last one, of just kind of, envisioning what that being that has 10 out of 10 love, 10 out of 10 kindness, that knows all these things, what they would say to you. What came up for me was they'd say, "You've got this, keep being your best self, be love, live love, smile often, enjoy the little things, be kindness, like don't sweat the small stuff, just be your best self, do your best, and spread the love."
Perfect. Perfect.
'Cause
And that advice is
the wisdom's all there, right? Like, we have the wisdom. You just need, ninja tools to finesse it out. It's not like things that we don't know. We know all this stuff. Like, it's in there. We just have to tap into it and find it.
yeah. We're learning. We're all in the process of learning, how to best utilize our free will. That's what it comes down to. That sounds really confusing, by the way. I'm like, we're all learning how to make the best use of our free will, right? We screw up the controls, by indulging in, thinking that is later regrettable to us, I guess. But all right. What about who else wants to share closing remarks, reflections? Steve, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think, it's just a good reminder, kind of like Joel said, right? I mean, it's, these questions are a good way for me to maybe verbalize some abstractness around some of this topic, right? Of,
Mhm.
you know, you say the answer and I go, or the question, I go, oh yeah, right. That's a great question. I kind of think I know, you know, I'm going to chew on that. But, you know, sometimes, you know, for me, I see something or someone says something and I go, okay, I kind of had that in abstract, but you just put it in a format that I can relate to, or that I can, like the light bulb just went off, you know, kind of thing. And so I think, you know, like Joel's saying, a lot of times there's just, for me, abstractness floating around in my head, or, you know, I know the answer, but I can't formulate the words or put it in the right context. Um, you know, but we do. I think we've got it in there. I think when we, you know, learn things, especially things that, you know, have to do with spirituality and divinity and those types of things, I personally don't think that's us learning. I think that's us remembering things from before that we forgot. And you know, and we talk about learning, you know, I learned this. I think a lot of what we actually learn in this life is remembering in a different context, because I am driving a different vehicle for the past 50 years than what I drove for however long I existed before now, right? My vehicle's different, but it's just a good reminder, you know, to stop and ponder on this stuff. And I've tried to, as I drive, turn off the radio sometimes, especially when I'm alone, and just think on things, or as I'm biking or walking or running. And so I think these are some great questions to, you know, for me to put up on my wall, you know, to keep my mind focused in that direction.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I know, and you know, it's interesting you brought up the point of you know, that you can really express and share a lot of what's going on, but sometimes it's harder for you to grasp the context and be able
Yeah.
to simplify it. Do you want to know how I do it with people? I don't even listen to the words you're saying. I just try to read the intention of your heart in that moment you're sharing. And then I just come up with a sentence or two. Because if I listen to all those words, I'll be just as confused as you are. Like,
Yeah.
but you want to know something funny? If you're ever trying to really simplify the concept so you can grasp it, you can do the same thing. Just
Yeah.
tune into the own intention of your heart. What is my real heart's intention here? You know, it's just like, really, I need to just know what the highest good is in every moment. In this moment, the highest good is getting to my daughter's wedding, not helping that person whose car broke down. In another moment, I help them with their car that broke down. I just need to remember that if I live my life by what is the highest good in this moment, that I'll be living my highest value, and I'll have an easier time accepting myself because I'm clear on what I stand for, and I like what I stand for. Because what I stand for is what that guy who saved me, it's what he stood for. And not only did he save me physically, but he's actually given me an example that inspires me. And because I accept him, I will accept myself if I am living his value. That's the intention of your heart that I perceived on tonight's topic.
Yes.
You know, and I would say for me, you know, I have my role model is, my biggest role model is Paramahansa Yogananda. You know, much of the wisdom that I may share with all of you is in some way coming from him, right? Even though I don't think most people even know who he is. He was just like this extremely loving saint that was just, you know, he was trying to live the example of Jesus, like in a very real modern way. And he was trying to, you know, live the examples of many other Saints, Francis of Assisi, and all these people in just our modern world, and just did such a beautiful, relatable job of it, right? And so for me, I think if I'm living his values, then I can't think of, like for me, it gets me excited to know that I'm going to live his values, because I'm so inspired by the life example he left behind, right? So, yeah, excellent share, Steve. Excellent share, as always. Chris, how about yourself?
I think self-acceptance, and I do like your idea about Yogananda, and I think because you have such a deeper connection with him, it is easier for you to express his values and express his teachings in such a more meaningful way and a more simple way. And I think when we're talking about self-acceptance, it's really a simple code. It's simple, easy to follow instructions. I think we get too caught up in today's world. And if you look at coding in general, like things made by Microsoft, their coding is fatty. It is sloppy. It is too huge. It is, I don't want to say disorganized all the time, but it makes something that's just really simple way more complex than it needed to be. I feel that when we talked about like the baby drill, focusing on yourself as a young baby and how you would care for that baby, really that is the essence of self-acceptance. There is no need to go any further than that. We could have started with that and ended with that. But because of how society has evolved, how our professional lives have evolved, because we're looking through the lens of our professional lives and technology and how it makes it much more grandiose. It makes it much more features, more steps. And those are supposed to make it more beautiful. But really, it makes it more complex and unnecessarily complex. Self-acceptance is simplicity of accepting yourself as you are, warts and all, your dark side, your angry side, accepting all those parts. Once we start to try to stop being what we think people want to be so they will accept us so that we seem less dangerous. You had mentioned before in the beginning of the conversation, why do people not try to be themselves? Because people see that as being dangerous. They see themselves as being dangerous because they see themselves being their authentic selves, and they're scared of two types of emotions, the other person's and their own. When you start to be your own authentic self, setting those healthy boundaries, you're being self-accepting. You accept yourself, like you said, for warts and all. And it's more simple than sometimes what we make it out to be. But because of that simplicity, it also comes with a warning label, meaning that we actually have to do the work and the hard work of making ourselves better, because now we've been unencumbered by all this extra code. Now it's up to us to build ourselves the way that we want to be built. I have some good ideas in there, but I did kind of fall off track, and sometimes I did not express it the best I could have.
I mean, I'll tell you what I sensed is that you're basically sharing, be in a state of acceptance as you continue to make the effort to move forward with your life. Be in a state of acceptance as you continue to make the effort to move forward, right?
And you can see how that's a one simple piece of code without a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to just be in a state of acceptance than to be in a state of evaluation and judgment, because it's just it doesn't even work that way. Like there's no end to the judgment, right? So it's a trap. It creates a spell of suffering, and we need to break out of it. So the key is, when having this kind of a discussion and sharing a lot of this wisdom, you want to share it in a way that they're doing you the favor and that you, in just teaching this, taking this conversation, the key points and sharing it, you teaching it actually does help you learn it better. So in truth, they are doing you a favor. Just share the theme of this conversation with anyone who will listen. In indirect ways, you'll benefit them, but in very direct ways, you're going to benefit yourself, because to even articulate all this stuff, you're going to have to get very clear and reinforce it, and it'll be internalized. So just to summarize, you know, like if you're at war within, you're probably going to be at war without in the world. Create peace on the inside, you'll be able to create peace on the outside of your life. Like that's very much what this is. And that starts with self-acceptance. Don't be at war with yourself, right? We also had the assessment, the 6 questions, rescore it again, maybe in 4 to 6 weeks. You know, we need to come up with our rule on, you know, what has to happen for us to be acceptable to ourselves, right? You know, which usually comes down to figuring out what's important to us in life and committing to that. You know, what's important to me is just always figuring out what the highest good is in the moment and then just following through on that. Or just figuring out, like, you know, how I can, I think it was my honorable intentions. I think it was Joel's, and just what are my honorable intentions and how can I live by them? Right. So figuring those out, you know, figuring out our good self-definition, view yourself as a high effort learner with high potential. And that's a good way to define yourself, to give you strength, keep you strong for this stuff. And then we just need to brainstorm all the reasons why all of this lack of self-acceptance stuff is a bad idea, why we shouldn't beat ourselves up. We just need to convince ourselves of those and just create clear and compelling arguments on that. And then just have these tools that we know we can defer to if we ever need to cultivate greater self-acceptance. You know, just doing the baby drill, or doing that ancient, all-wise, all-loving friend, consulting them, just really get into that state of imagining them being there and taking in their wisdom and guidance, or, you know, focusing on everything you like about yourself. And that really helps us fulfill our higher purpose in this life. So,
but again, this is all hypothetical. Any correlation to your own experience is purely speculative.
Results may vary.
Yeah, I love it.
Maybe a few typos.
You know what's the good thing about making mistakes and stumbling through life? That we don't have to do it alone. We get to invite in our friends, and we get to stumble our way and try to figure it out together. And obviously our conversation here today is a gift to anyone else who will watch the recording in future, which is our gift of love and wisdom to people who we may never even meet, but strangers care. And that's why we get together and share these conversations. So I thought you were all an awesome 10 out of 10 tonight. Let's do a go team on 3, fist bump, elbow bump, and we're out. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Go team!
Go team!
Cool.
Team.
Arm flex, because we're all
Love you
men
guys.
right now.
Yes, we are. Rock on.
Thanks, Brendan. Thanks, everybody.